Hey everyone, my name's Jamie McGlue, and I'm going to urge you today to go to saveeuropeact.com and sign it. Basically, although it's controversial and definitely you're going to get judged by many people, it's actually the right thing to do. And you can do a very good deed, and help the world, be a good person, basically. And, often what is right seems like wrong, and people will tell you it's wrong. So you're in Nazi Germany, you want to help the Jews, you're going to get judged by a lot of people. You're in the Middle Ages and you're like, hey, we shouldn't burn that woman. You're going to get judged, right? Same thing in the current day. And so the greatest acts of kindness you can do, usually the mob is not going to be too happy about it. The 10% of the population who get mobilized and used as thugs to push everyone around and bully people. So the Save Europe Act, it is a proposal for remigration. So basically, people who have come to Europe illegally, um, uh, say they're not actual refugees, they're pretending to be. And in Ireland, we know from even government sources, 90% of them, and I've got this confirmed by, I teach English and students who work in these centers, they've told me, the people were telling them themselves. So the vast majority of them are not genuine refugees. They're not in danger. Um, and in countries like Ireland, that makes a lot of sense because how is this the first country that was safe? You're meant to go to the first safe country. That would be Italy or Greece or Spain at the least. So remigrating, sending people back to their homelands when they have come to Europe illegally. They broke the law coming here. You're not allowed to do that. The laws are there for a reason. And also people who came to Europe legally, but then broke the law while they're here. So if you've murdered or raped or assaulted or defrauded people, etc., you've committed a serious crime, then you would be sent back. And then a third part of the Save Europe Act is a commitment in general to have less migration into Europe, including like legal migration. So in general, just ending the whole mass migration paradigm. So now here I'm going to give you three reasons why this is a great idea, right? So people who came here illegally or they came legally and broke the law, and then down the line, even just reducing the amount of people who come here legally, and probably pausing it temporarily if we can. So the reasons are one, practical. So in terms of just economics and logistics, just organizational, our pressure on our resources. Second is security and safety. And then third is cultural and like identity. Okay. So first of all, the practical reasons. So bringing a ton of people, more people into the economy, that means there's more competition for jobs. And so that lowers the wages of people, right? Naturally. So obviously big business it benefits from many, many unskilled workers being brought into the country and even more skilled people. So there are more people competing for jobs. So wages go down. This is supply and demand. And so people say, oh, well, they're doing the jobs that, Native Europeans don't want to do because they're lazy and, privileged. Well, guess what? Someone has to do the jobs. So if these people weren't coming in, people would be, all those jobs would be done by Europeans because they have to get done. And guess what? Maybe the employer would have to pay them a bit more for it. And so, oh, you can get 20 euros an hour cleaning toilets. 20 euros an hour, that's much better than, I don't know, whatever an hour at McDonald's. I'd feel better about that actually, or whatever. So this is one thing. It would drive up wages for the average person. Um, uh, Secondly, another side of this is still the first point, the practical side, is just logistics. Like so, housing in many parts of Europe, there's a shortage of housing. In Ireland, where I live, it's incredible. Like thousands and thousands of young Irish people are leaving the country every year. It seems the majority of young people are considering leaving. Actually, I think 70% I heard at some point. And they're all going off to Australia or somewhere in search of a better life where they can buy a house. So if you don't have like a really high income in Ireland at the moment, it's very difficult to rent and it's very difficult to buy a home. So how are you going to start a family? So people naturally want to have a family, most people, and so it's very difficult. And so that's housing, right? Big problem. And we've had a housing crisis for like over 10 years, and they're like bringing in more and more people. The government said, we want to increase the population by 1 million people. Simon Coveney saying this. And half of them will come from outside of Ireland. And so, A, who gave him the mandate to do that? Nobody, except maybe, the shadowy powers and the WEF or something. But so there's already this massive crisis, and they're bringing in more people. It doesn't make sense. Also, schools, hospitals, massive waiting lists for children to get surgeries, and you're bringing in more and more people. This doesn't make it easier. Just think about it. It's impossible. That's going to have no effect. That's going to make it more difficult to get for hospitals to function. So housing, hospitals, schools, public transport, trains and buses overflowing with people. Well, in Ireland, that's often the case where it's really, it's difficult sometimes. People can't get on the bus, even if they've got like a babies in a pram or on the train, and rush hour. Oh, no one. Guess what? There's massive numbers of people who aren't Irish here. If there wasn't this migration paradigm, and especially the illegal stuff that's been coming in recently, this would not be as much of an issue. And so that you have people coming in who they didn't pay for these services, they didn't pay taxes, or they weren't robbed by the government to pay for dodgy services, which itself is a kind of silly paradigm in my opinion, but that's another story. But they haven't paid these taxes. Their parents and grandparents haven't paid these taxes. They're coming in and benefiting from this system and making it more difficult for the locals who have been paying taxes, and their parents, they've earned this over time through their family having to pay for it and build it. So so that's the practical side, pushing down wages and just putting pressure on housing, hospitals, schools, and public transport. So how can you argue with that? Obviously, bringing in a huge amount of people, even if they're blonde-haired, blue-eyed, you know, whatever, the most European stereotypical people you could find, doesn't matter. They shouldn't, if you were like, let's bring in a million Americans or 1 million Australians, I'd be like, no, don't do that. That's a bad idea. Too much. Um, so it's not about, where they come from on this level. It's just that is putting too much pressure, and that's not fair. That's not right for the local people, especially since the dodgy elites have already been through the financial crisis, all these shenanigans, destroying the middle class, COVID, biggest upward transfer of wealth transfer in human history up to the elite class from the middle class. All this hollowing out of the regular economy. It's not fair, and this mass migration paradigm is just part of that. Okay, point number 2 is security. You may not know, I didn't know this until recently. I think maybe shockingly, like a year or two ago, I only learned this, is that there is a much, much higher rate of violent crime from immigrants to Europe than among native Europeans. So we're not talking absolute numbers. We're talking per person. So if you take the percentage of Africans or Middle Eastern people or Indians or Latin Americans or whatever who are committing crimes. So how many among that group commit crimes? What percentage is it? Compare that to the percentage of Europeans who are committing crimes. It is like in way, way, way higher. In cases of certain countries, even like Afghani and Algerians, it's like 50 times higher, or even more. Like I can't remember it, but it's mind blowing, the numbers. Now, and and you can't say, oh, it's because just poverty, or well, even if you do say that, like, oh, they've come from difficult situations. Okay, great. But if you have like, oh, here's a homeless guy, he wants to come in my house and he's got a bad criminal record, but that's because of his upbringing. He had a difficult time. Okay, we understand that. We can have empathy for him, but you want to bring him into the house where your children are sleeping and he's got this criminal record. That doesn't make sense. You can have empathy, but you still shouldn't let them in. So even if that is the case, you're saying, oh, these people have, yeah, okay, fine. I acknowledge. A lot of people wouldn't acknowledge this. By the way, look it up. Don't just go, oh, this guy's crazy. No, look it up. Like you will realize it is true. Even talk to the AI. Be like, hey, is this true? You'll see, yeah, it's a fact. It's a public record, right? And it's just ignored by the media because it's not convenient. But and especially among, yes, certain groups, it's much, much higher. But there are many Europeans who are in a terrible situation, very poor or having a difficult time. But so that's still in, the European, and you have many foreigners coming in who are like very wealthy, kind of privileged in their country. Hence, they were able to get the visas and pay for everything to get in here. So it's not just that, right? It seems like there's some sort of cultural thing going on where in certain cultures, We can look at that within Europe. There's differences within the cultures in Europe, right? And certain countries more productive, certain countries maybe a bit more happy and relaxed, certain countries have maybe better music. It depends on the focus of what's valued and what's considered normal and important in your culture. And there's certain parts of, say, like European history where the culture in Europe was really toxic. You could see like Nazi Germany, like, yeah, let's kill the people who don't agree with us, kill the journalists, kill, the political opposition, right? That's not good. We can call that out and say that some culture is inferior to others. So we need to be able to have the balls to say that about everything in the world. Like, look, some cultures, if it's like, yeah, it's okay for grown men to rape little girls, or it's okay that women can't drive, or it's okay that, the government are allowed to be gangsters and everyone's just blasé about it. Yeah, no worries. This is not good culture. That's inferior, right? And just like doesn't mean you're going to judge them as like a human being, but you're going to say your software you're using is dodgy. You need to work on that. And it could be great in certain ways, but not so good in other ways. Like Irish culture, many beautiful things I love about Ireland, but there's a bunch of things where I'm like, this is junk, this is bad. A lot of it from colonialism and stuff, but it's our responsibility to improve it and to change that, right? So whatever the reason is, whether it's cultural or what, the fact is, rapes, murders, assaults, all this stuff is skyrocketing in Europe, in connection with mass migration. If we were to do the remigration thing, the numbers of women getting raped and children getting raped or harmed, in Ireland, these children getting stabbed by some guy who was Ricard Bucheka, I think he's from Algeria, some guy who basically he said his reasons were he got refused a social welfare payment. He's been living off the taxpayer for like I think it was 20 years in Ireland, doesn't speak English, completely just being a parasite here, not, in the sense of like not giving, just taking, taking, taking. That kind of parasitic psychology where he's just happy to be taking, 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 not giving anything. And then some point, oh, not giving, you know, the hand that's been feeding him, said, "Oh no, you can't have this payment," and so he went off. I'm going to kill. And so he's stabbing these children. At least one of whom is really severely disabled now and has to eat through a straw and can't sleep. All these terrible things, just and saying "shit Irish, shit Irish." Okay, so you have these crazy people coming in, right? Like, and it's not an isolated incident. You can see it in the numbers, right? So this is really serious. So if you're like, oh, we need to protect these people. You're a racist and they're the victim. Okay, be very careful that your ideology here doesn't make you an assistant and an accessory to the rape and murder and assault of innocent women and children and men. But let's just say, including immigrants, often within the community that, it could, not just against Europeans, but so it doesn't make sense. So this is one side of the security thing that there's this massive increase in assaults, murders, all this stuff. Okay, so remigration, if you sign the Save Europe Act, it will help with this, right? To reduce these crimes that are happening. Thirdly, sorry, before the third, also security, like it's predicted that at the current trajectory, Ireland, which has been oppressed for hundreds of years, fighting for the right to have our own homeland, that by 2050 will be the minority. The ethnic Irish will be a minority in Ireland. Now, you might think, well, okay, that feels kind of bad. But then, wait a minute, races doesn't matter, right? Maybe you're racist. Why do you care? They're all going to be Irish. Okay, the ideology in Europe might be that in the West these days that, oh, skin color doesn't matter, and like, where you're from, it's all cool. You can become Swedish even if you're from Iran or whatever, and but if you look around the world, most countries don't believe that. That's not what they believe. Even the people coming into Europe, you talk to people who have like, they're third generation Germans, they will laugh at you. Apparently, yeah, apparently they will like laugh at you, be like, yeah, I'm German, sure. I'm Moroccan or I'm Iranian or whatever it is. And it really seems like a lot of the people even here, they don't believe that. But around the world, like, and I'm an English teacher, so I talk to people all from all around the world all the time. And when I ask them this, the vast majority of people, like, they don't think that way. They think like, well, no, like, I mean, you can't just become Japanese just because you were born there and your parents are Irish or something and you're Japanese now. It's like you're you're in Japan and you're a member of Japanese society. We could say that you're a European member of Japanese society or a Chinese member of Japanese society. But like you can't just magically become another tribe. That's another nation. It doesn't work like that. That's the way most people. Now you go, if you don't believe me, go talk to immigrants, like, to Europe or whatever, and see, hey, how do you think it works? And if they're waiting on a citizenship application or something, they might tell you that. But I think the vast majority of people, they would have this common sense attitude of like, look, you can be part of the culture, but if unless you marry in, and oh, then your children are half Irish, half German, half Italian. Okay, now we can say that they are Italian or Irish or German, although you might still say not as much as someone who's, pure blood, so to speak, like, and which people would be uncomfortable with that term probably. But like, I just mean where both sides of your family, that's the cultural inheritance. Whereas, say, my children are half Irish from me, and their mother is Czech, right? So I'm fully aware they're getting a double inheritance, and it's great. But in a country in general, you cannot not have too much of that. And I would definitely not be in favor of the whole of Ireland being like this half half. No, like I happen to love someone who is from not Irish, so this is what happened. This is, but in general, we need to be aware that like, so this is the punchline here of this is that if why does it matter if it's a minority? Most people, they don't believe like, oh yeah, we'll all be Irish or we'll all be German, or they don't think that way. They're unlikely to change their minds. And so you need to understand throughout history, whenever one group becomes a minority, they lose political power. And when you lose political power, you become at a danger. You're at the mercy of the dark side of human psychology. Humans, and now I think most people would agree with this, humans are not that mature. Look what we're doing to nature, right? Look at what we do to each other. Look at like all the crime and all the war and the greed and the corruption, and even in your own life, how often you fall short of your aspirations. This is humanity in our current state. Do we really think it's a good idea to create situations where indigenous people, like the people of Ireland, the people of wherever in Europe, the indigenous native people are going to be just hoping that, oh, we're in the minority now and the majority are from elsewhere, but we're just going to hope that we don't get persecuted. We hope that that everyone's going to take on board this culture of tolerance, which has been a European creation. It's not, you don't find that around the world. And even in Europe, it's often like been the talk, but maybe not totally implemented. But it is this idea that we should like, oh, let everyone live and let live and stuff. But just to say, this is really a dangerous thing. If the native people are becoming a minority in your country, there is the chance of the thing in like a Rwanda or whatever kind of thing happening where like the two groups, one just goes nuts and goes after the other, or what is happening in Northern Ireland for the, up until the Good Friday Agreement, where you had even two groups, and even they're both Irish, but one of them is like, oh, we're the loyalists, kind of Protestant, but basically loyalists, like we want to stay part of the British Empire or the United Kingdom. And the other half are nationalists. You might say Catholic, but really it's all about nationalism. Some of them were Protestants, or atheists or whatever. The nationalists who want to be all Ireland should all remain one country. It got split 100 years ago, 1922, I think. That shouldn't have happened. We're all one country. And the nationalists, for decades and decades, were blocked out of getting government jobs. There was gerrymandering, so they couldn't get elected, and the democratic process didn't work. There was all these situations. The security services, oh, you've got a gun, you're in big trouble, mate. Oh, wait, you're a loyalist? Oh, whatever, no big deal. We'll turn a blind eye. So there's all this stuff where there was massive systemic discrimination, essentially apartheid, in Northern Ireland. Because they were the minority, and they were a very big minority, they're almost 50-50, but the way they set up the state intentionally is to make sure the lawyers had a majority. So you need to be aware this is not safe at all. So that's the second point. This is security. Third point is cultural slash identity. So Europe, if you bring in all these people from all these other countries, even if it's legal, like a lot of it's not illegal as it currently stands, but even if it was all legal, you're going to change the culture. And this idea of like, yeah, if we have everyone from everywhere in Dublin or in Stockholm or in Rome, this is a great thing. Look, Pakistanis, Africans, Brazilians. It's like, I want to go to Brazil and have a Brazilian experience. I want to go to Japan, have a Japanese experience. I want to go to Ethiopia and have an Ethiopian experience. If I go to these places and I see everyone from everywhere, it's not as nice. It's a monoculture. It's not diversity. True diversity is where we have these different rich expressions, and just like, you don't have someone from a jazz band and a punk band and a classical music band all forced to play together and try to make. No, you can go listen to the jazz band, then listen to the classical, and listen to the punk, and it's all vibing off each other and developing something unique. And so I want to go to somewhere in Europe and have a European experience. A little bit of people from abroad, that can be cool, and definitely it can improve things. I wouldn't say it's necessary, but like a little bit of like, yeah, people from Africa or Middle East or Asia and stuff, this can definitely improve things. Different ideas can, be spread. But these days we have the internet and, travel and, uh, business, commerce, international commerce, and books and movies and music can travel all around the world. So we don't really even need it these days. But still, it can have a role in, benefiting things. But at the scale, that has to be very small. When you start getting to large numbers, you really have a big risk, not only of making the native people become a minority, or having particular, things like security issues, you're just letting people in, and the risk of resources and economic pressures on the lower classes with wages being pushed down. But you also have this cultural thing where people, their sense of belonging and who we are gets damaged, and just where oh, it's kind of everything everywhere is just like everywhere now. It's like, you've seen one place, you've seen them all. And also that just the inheritance from our ancestors, and especially in places like Ireland, this is crucially important. Mar in Changa, Gaelga, ní féidir in Nadina Ismo Nadina and Aaron a Lart in Changa na Héireann Gaelga. So I'm speaking Irish here. I'm trying to, but like I'm learning Irish, right? Gaelic, but Gaelga, right? Gaelin, Gaelic, Gaelga, three different names for it, even within Irish. If anyone in Ireland is, oh, don't call it Gaelic. That's literally one of the names for it. People don't realize. Anyway, in the language. Anyway, this is almost extinct, right? The British intentionally tried to exterminate it, killing people who were speaking it and making it really hard to speak it. And in the famine, they intentionally genocided people during the famine, pretended it was a famine. It was really a genocide. Using the famine as a cover and part of the mechanism of that. And that mostly affected Irish speakers. And so they did this for political and reasons to gain power, make people Ireland, like Irelandshire, more like part of the British Empire. And people are trying to bring the language back, and then the government's bringing in, tons and tons of these people from all over the place who need to learn English. And I'm an English teacher, I'll tell you, it's difficult, it takes time. And you're asking them to learn Irish as well as that. That's like impossible. They're not going to do it. They'll get some token basic level of the language, which is what a lot of people are getting at the moment. And it's not enough. The language will die if we do not protect it. And I do not think it's literally possible to maintain mass immigration and have the language survive. And that's a terrible thing. And look your ancestors in the eye, in your mind, and explain to them why that makes sense. Never mind the first three reasons I said are practical reasons and security reasons, just the cultural reasons of this. If you're Irish and you're saying, yeah, no, it's a good idea, let all these people in. If you love it, most people don't want this, right? This mass immigration thing. 90% of people in Ireland are against that. Like, oh, it's too high. And so if you really want that, okay, go to New York, go to Sydney, go to these places where, okay, European culture is brought there from abroad, and, totally unfairly, there was genocides against the native people, and, there's beautiful things to these countries as well, but there's a dark history there where people were displaced. Two wrongs don't make a right. Just because the European royal families went and did that around the world while they were repressing the commoners in Europe also, by the way. So it's not Europeans in general who did this. Two wrongs don't make a right. Doesn't mean you can go then, replace the Europeans and say, yeah, ha, now we got even. It's like, that's not fair, right? But there's some parts of the world where, like Latin America, Australia, like Oceania, New Zealand, and say North America, where you can say, okay, there could be more reason for having a mix of things, and you can go there and enjoy having all these cultures around you. So why don't you go there? If it really matters that much to you. But we don't need to make the whole world like this. And if you tried to do that in Africa and Asia, people would lynch you for it. They would be like, hey, you can't do that. This is our land. This is where we live, right? So Europeans need to be much less meek and say, look, it's not okay. It doesn't make any sense for these three reasons, right? But the cultural thing is really important, and that Europeans have a right to have European culture, to look around and have a European vibe. Everything feels and looks European. It's not just like kebab stores everywhere or like It's delicious. I love it, but I don't, you can go to Istanbul and get that, or you can go to, whatever, Mexico and have Mexican food. So, and like I teach these people, right? I care about these people. I do the best job I can, right? So it's been something I've had to think a lot about. Can I justify this? Is this some prejudice thing? Like, how does this make sense? But no, I want to help you as the individual, and a certain number of individuals is cool, you know, but it's just in general, when you've got too many people, it brings up these serious problems. And so there's a limit. It's like one person can be late to the meeting, no big deal. Meeting continues. If everyone's late, or half the people are late to the meeting breaks down, right? Or a party, a few people come to the party who you don't know. Oh, that's cool. But if a quarter of the people or half the people at the party are people you don't know, suddenly it breaks off into cliques. It doesn't work anymore. Or people joining a session. One guy joins a session. Oh, I better fit in with the music. But if you got five guys joining a session, suddenly the music breaks down, right? So it's just the way of nature. It's just the way things work. And it makes no sense what's happening. But why is it happening then? Because basically I would say, you don't need to agree with me, but I would, and you can still sign the Save Europe Act, but I would say basically it's a ploy by these globalists who are trying to take over the world, take away your freedoms, make your children slaves. Who, why is the COVID messaging also coordinated? And why was this Event 201 thing with Bill Gates and all them connected, talking about exactly the same scenario in late 2019 when this apparently hadn't happened yet? Why is the Wuhan, this Institute of Virology, this high security government lab with the United States and Chinese militaries collaborating on biological warfare stuff with coronaviruses from bats, modifying them, and then just down the road, oh, coronavirus appears. Is this, and it's never mentioned. Like all this stuff, and you can go back, war on terror, all this stuff. It's all shonky. It all stinks. If you just got rid of the fear of being called crazy and a conspiracy theorist for a second, um, isn't it obvious that people, the selfish instincts of humanity, is mostly concentrated amongst the powerful, because the most selfish people seek power, and it's a big problem. Powerful people, there can be great people there. I know people who are like relatively powerful. Been privileged to meet some people in some of these circles through my life, and a lot of them are really cool people. Like, and I'm not saying I've met like super, super powerful, but like people maybe mid-level, and a lot of cool people. But it's like still, it's like there's that danger in that higher levels where you have that instinct for power, which among someone who doesn't have a lot of power in the lower classes, okay, they'll just be a bit of a jerk sometimes. But you give them a lot of power, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, that kind of vibe. And we are being brainwashed into ignoring the fact that it's happening. And what's the benefit in turning Europe into some multicultural homogenized soup? Well, then people don't really stand up for themselves as easily. It's hard. It's easier to control people, divide and conquer, basically. And so and you can read this in documents from esoteric, kind of shadowy elite organizations where they've talked about this in the open, about the Kalergi plan, or like just the Rockefellers talking about all this stuff, and they'll be like, if people found out, we're in big trouble. They'll like kind of mention this stuff, and so if you're open-minded, you can look into this stuff. Michael Tazarion, Tsarion, would point you in the right way with a lot of this stuff, or Mark Passio, Passio, or G. Edward Griffin, a bunch of people. But anyway, I'll leave it there. But finally, so if I've persuaded you, okay, for practical security and cultural reasons, yeah, this doesn't make sense. We should try to, people who've come here illegally, send them back, right? If you're actually, your life is in danger, okay, we'll protect you, of course, genuine refugee, but they shouldn't be coming into like Norway or Ireland or something. It's like, okay, that's dodgy. If you're coming in, then you should be in Italy or Greece, somewhere on the edge of the continent, right? Logically. So, but so basically, with that exception for genuine refugees, the illegal people who've come in illegally, people who came in legally but then committed crimes, they got to go. Send them out. That's fair, absolutely fair. And then thirdly, the general thing of like, yeah, legal people. Oh, it's racist to stop legal migration, though. Why? These three reasons apply to legal migration, and that's, I think, the largest amount of migration is coming through legal means. And I would not wish that upon Japan. I would not wish that upon Nigeria. I would not wish that upon El Salvador. So we should not wish it upon any part of Europe, right? Now, the Save Europe Act. So it's in the link in the description, but I'll show you now the page here. So you can go here and sign it. Now, what's interesting about this is that if it gets to 1 million signatures, it will actually it's part of a European Union mechanism. So it's not a normal petition or, sign, this thing to get awareness, which has its role, but often it's a bit of a waste of time, doesn't do much. This one is a legal mechanism within the European Union framework of law where it triggers if 1 million people sign it, then the European Union, the Commission, they're legally bound to consider it and to give a public response of why they're rejecting it or why they're accepting it. I'd be shocked if they accepted it. But so that even if, when they're rejecting it, presumably, if and when, we'll see, but then they would have to explain that. And they're going to have a very difficult time explaining it. And this is going to raise a lot of awareness in Europe of like, oh my God, what's going on here? And so it's a great opportunity to push pressure. There are not many opportunities where participating in the system can actually help liberate us from the system. A lot of it's like pointless, I would say, just to derail our energy, where the main energy should be awakening to greater clarity in your own mind, and then sharing that through conversation and like what I'm doing here, trying to help spread awareness this way. But there are certain points where action actually is useful. I'd say these are the three steps, awareness, communication, and action. But this would be one thing where if we get 1 million signatures, then the European Union, they have to respond to this and show their cards. And it's going to, help to clarify the issues and spread the movement to set fair boundaries in Europe. And with that, then we have the opportunity to help do that for the rest of the world. And my dream is that Europe can reestablish itself in freedom and peace and Europeanness and the right to have our own land. And Ireland as a microcosm of that, to Irishness and to have our own nation and bring back the language and, not hating, not for hate of outsiders, but for love of the insider, for love of your own people, love of your own family. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, to even your best friend, no, you can't live in my house. You may be homeless, but I'm not letting, this is for me and my family, and I love you, but let's hang out over at the cafe, right? We can do that with the people from on the same level as nations and as civilizations or continents, Um, so let's see, what's the numbers at currently? Let's see. I think, does it say here? 520,000 people, right? So it's just over halfway there. And I think there's going to be some event on the 15th of July. So what's that? Sometime this week in Brussels, some big kind of protest rally kind of thing. So if we can get that number as high as possible by then, that would be great. And so, look, and I think you sign it and then you have to like verify in your email, right? So I, I'm taking a risk in some way, like, talking about these things, right? Like people, I'm going to get judgment, from the general public, maybe from some of my students being like, hey, what are you doing? But it's a small risk, but like still, like I hope you can appreciate that I'm sure you have most people would have a natural resistance to talking about this. But think about it. If it makes sense to you, yeah, for those three reasons there, actually it's not fair. It's not right. It would be a good thing if this could stop. And we just have no immigration, legal immigration, or maybe very slight, okay, you people fell in love when you're studying here on study programs is fine, so within a limited thing, but like we're talking about like citizenships and permanent residence and or just everyone can come here and work. It's like maybe some very limited job, think we need these jobs. We don't have enough local people to do them. Okay. Or students, some limited thing. Okay, fine. So say there's that kind of thing happening and people fall in love and okay, they want to have a family. Okay, cool. You're going to marry into the nation. You're going to become part of the nation. No big deal. Or with genuine refugees to some extent. But apart from that, if we could say just end this. If you agree that yeah, ending this would be a good thing, this current paradigm, then you are being a bad person if you don't take action, right? Now, signing this is one thing you can do, but you just understand, right? We have to be really clear about this. Like, if you're in Nazi Germany, you have a moral obligation to try to do something. You don't put yourself in too much danger unless you've got the guts for it. But you should really try to push back against evil. And this is evil. It's essentially a genocide that's going on, not by murder directly, but a much more subtle one because people are too savvy and aware these days to pull that off. But it's not right, and it's terrible, and people are dying and being raped en masse by these things, by the way. And so I would urge you to, just okay, push back and push through your little internal guilt trigger, being triggered of guilt, or am I a bad person? But like, no, you're not. This is logic, but it's just part of the culture is to assist and uh, facilitate this crime. There has been this cultural shaming and tabooing thing going on for like decades. So push through that, do the right thing, sign this, and just maybe yeah, let's all try to get over our fear and be able to look anyone from India or Brazil, whoever, in the eyes and be like, hey, I wish you all the best, and I want your country to thrive, and I want my country to thrive, and that's what it's all about. It's all about love, love of your own country enough to stand up and be judged in order to do the right thing. So that's it. Or one final thing just to say is like on the thing of like some people might feel uncomfortable being like, oh, saying, are you saying they're all crazy rapists and murderers? No, it's going to be a small minority of these people. I assume in most cases, I don't know the exact numbers, but what I should look into that actually. But I would assume it's a small minority of the groups of Algerians or Afghanis or whatever who are doing that. But still, the numbers, the percentage is way too high, way higher than here. And so in that case, it's too dangerous. You've no obligation to bring them into your country or into your house, right? If there's someone who's like, you seem like, oh, you are from some circle of friends, you want to come to my party, but your whole circle of friends, a bunch of them are mad dogs, they cause fights. Sorry, nothing personal, but I'm not letting you in the party just because I'm not going to take that chance. You know, that's totally legitimate. And so it's an important thing. We're not judging the whole group of people, and that is a distraction, and that is a bad thing. That's like the road of hatred or prejudice. We're not talking about that. We're saying it's just being aware of like, okay, there's your culture, just in general, saying like, look, there's too much in general of this, so and for these other reasons as well. We should be cutting off the migration thing and having very minimal or zero. But if you want to get into it, and someone asks you about it, you can say, look, I'm not. It's just if you have a large minority of your culture doing terrible things, you need to sort that out amongst yourselves, and that's not our fault. We're not a bad person for mentioning it. If anything, there are bad people in your midst for not addressing that, and you need to have a conversation. And what are you doing if you're part of one of these cultures? What are you doing to push back against that? And in many cases, they're not doing anything because they'll get a bullet to the head. And many of these cultures, you push back against the toxic minority, you get in big trouble. But hey, that's just proving the point, right? You've got an obligation. Every country, every civilization, we have our obligation to do our work, and there's nothing wrong at all about pointing out that, hey, there's too much of a danger from this certain group. We can't let you into the party. And in general, there's enough people at the party, perhaps, So go make your own party, yeah, and send us some pictures through the internet and write, and we can all, share it, even if we're not exactly in the same place. So, all right, much love, Gach Banach to everyone, and may the earth heal through this, through us all ironically turning more within and reestablishing our own families and tribes and nations. May this bring peace and unity to the world. All right, much love. Sign the thing and take it easy.